So we're already on Amud Aleph. I just want to quickly review it, Balpeh, so that we know where we're holding. So the Gemara taught us that the Gemara said that the Goyin of Achagayim doesn't pay kefel. That's only if it was before Yeush. But if it's after Yeush, since Yeush is Koina, so of course we're going according to the Shita that Yeush is Koina, then it belongs fully to the Gan of Rishon. When the Gan of Sheni steals it from him, it's as if he stole it from the original owner, and he will pay kefil. Rav Shesha said, "Kinayim v'shachav Rav omalo shmaitza." I think that this is incorrect. Why? Because he brought a raya from Rabbi Kiva who said that the reason why you pay dal v'hei is because you were nishtarish b'chet, which means is you solidified the chet. But how could mechira, if mechira is done before Yeush, mechira cannot solidify the chet, the mechira doesn't even work. And if it was done after Yeush, then you shouldn't be chayiv dal v'hei because you were already konyet, shaloyu teveach, shaloyu moich. So the Gemara says, in fact, it's before Yeush. And what is the reasoning why you pay dal v'hei, even though your mechira is not a valid mechira? It's mepnei shana b'chet. And Rashi says shana b'chet means Bava b'lo yahanu ma'asav mechayiv. Doubled up on your aveira. Yes, it was not effective. Your attempt to sell was not effective. The sale is not valid. But for attempting to sell it, for attempting to double up on the chet, you're paying dal v'hei. So we are 5 lines from the top on Daf Samach Esvanal. Toshma, the tavchay oy mecharay. We darshan the pasuk as follows: Ma tvicha she'ein chazeres. Just like tvicha, it doesn't come back. Ap mechir she'ein chazeres, meaning it's a valid sale. As Rashi says, kosol kadaitach dachi kamar lo mechayiv elahecha de mechira so mechir gemura. V'kanya lekech. Just like tvicha, after the animal is shechted, it's very much dead. So too, after the mechir is done, it has to be very much sold. But according to the way we're learning, it was just an attempted sale. Zok to Gemara Amos, Ilema lefnei Yeush, amai eine chazeres. As Rashi says, Shinu rishos below Yeush, mikani. Nobody holds selling it before Yeush will be effective. Ela la'achayish, it must be speaking la'achayish. I'm sorry, there's only a Shinu rishos. The object didn't change. You just tried to sell it, right? I'm sorry, but we're talking about mechir. Ela la'achar Yeush. What's be after Yeush? We saw Kedatich Yeush Kanya. Amai Mishalom Dal V'Hei. Why would you have to pay Dal V'Hei? Shalohu Teveach, Shalohu Moicher. So back to the same kasha again that we had. It must be speaking Lachar Yeush because here the Brisa says that the Mechira has to be effective. And if it's after Yeush, why would there be a chiv at all if Yeush by itself is going to be Koina? Zog to Gemara, Kedamar Rav Nachman. Maybe we could learn, like Rav Nachman will teach us a little bit later. You know what the Brisa is trying to tell us? That the Mechira has to be effective? It doesn't literally mean that it has to be effective. Because it's speaking before Yeush, and in fact the Mechira will not be effective. However, it just means that the Mechira that you made, had it been effective, it had to be a permanent Mechira. If the mechir done by the Ganav was like a 30-day sale, in other words, I'm going to lease you this animal that I stole for 30 days, that would not trigger a chiv dal v'hei. Thank you so much. Let's see Rashi. We're speaking before Yeush, and of course, we know the mechir is not going to be valid. But even a not valid mechira would have had to have been a permanent mechira. That we learned from Tvicha, that it has to be no backsies. It's not coming to exclude where his mechira doesn't work because there was no Yeush in advance of that mechira. We're sticking with Rabba's svara earlier that even though the attempted mechira that you tried to make didn't work, because you cannot sell, it will not be chal out the Yeush in advance. You're still chayiv because you try to double up. But when you try to double up, it has to be a real sale. He only sold it to him for 30 days. That's not really a sale. That's like a rental, and therefore, the there would not be a chiv alvei. So once again, the mechira doesn't have to work, but the mechira that you do had to have been a permanent mechira. May say.
We consider sale 3 days. Right.
It's a rental, but how do you know that Talbuk Machar only applies to an attempted sale, not an attempted rental? You know it from Tvicha. Because Tvicha, something cannot be shechted for 30 days. It's either all shechted or all not. Mesei, Ganiv, Uba'achar Begonvay. I guess that's our Mishnah. Harishon Mishalem Tashlume Kefel. The first Ganiv pays to the Bailam Tashlume Kefel. Basheni, and the second Ganiv, Eina Mishalem Ela Keren Bilbad, which is consistent with what we learned, as Rashi says, Eina Mishalem Ela Keren, Leganav Rishon, Yichsiv Gunav Mibeis Ha'ish. The Kefel is paid when you steal it from the original owner. What about Ganav Umachar? What if he stole it and he sold it? And then Uba'achar V'Gonvoi, and then someone else, I guess, stole it from the person who he sold it to. The first Ganav pays Arba V'Chamisha, and the second Ganav will pay Kefel. We're going to assume he's going to pay Kefel to the purchaser who had bought it from the Ganav. Okay, let's go on. Then we have a third case in the Brisa. Ganav v'Tavach. He stole an animal and he shechted it. Uba'achar v'Gonvoi. And then someone came and stole the shechted animal from the Ganav. Harishon Mishalem Tashlumi Dalvei. The original Ganav, of course, pays Dalvei. Vasheni Eini Mishalem Tashlumi Kefel Ela Keren Bilvad. But the second person who steals it from the Ganav, the shechted animal, will only pay the keren. I'm sorry? Because it's Ganav and the Ganav. He wasn't Koina it. That's exactly what the Gemara is going to drill down upon. So Ketani Mia, Mitziyasa, Ganav u'machar u'ba'achar v'ganvai, Harisha misham tashlumi dalvei, Vasheni misham tashlumi kefel. Just as Mati pointed out, Amos, what are we talking about? Ilema lefnei Yeush. If we're talking about before Yeush, which is how we've been learning all the sugya until now, Sheni Yemai misham tashlumi kefel. Exactly Mati's question. Why does the second one pay kefel? The person who bought it from the Ganav, it wasn't a valid sale. So therefore, Shinu Rishus, below Yeush, Mi'ika Lamanda Amar, the Kani, he's not Koina. Because Shoshana B'ched, that's what Rabbi said, right? Even though the Mechira is not Chal, even Shoshana B'ched, you try to double down on your Avera, but it's not valid. But the next guy who steals it from the purchaser, why should he be Chayiv Kefel? It never belonged to the purchaser. It still belongs to the original Bailam. So therefore, Mi'ika Lamanda the Kani, it must be that the case of the Mitziyasa, which actually confirms the sale as a valid sale, and therefore the person who stole it from the purchaser does pay kefel, it must be that the purchaser had purchased it from the Ganav after Yeush. But if you're going to hold that Yeush is Koina, amai mishalom tashlumi dal vei. Why would the Ganav, the original Ganav, pay dal vei to the original owner? Before he sold it, the owner was already miyayish. And if Yeush alone is Koina, the day who deserved, he sold his own item. He shouldn't be chayav dalvei. Visu. Now let's go back to the first case. The Katani Reisha Gonav u'bo'acher v'gonvoi. Rishon mishalom t'shlom kefel v'asheni ein mishalom elakeret michti lacher Yeush kamina. We just decided that the Bryce is going in a case where right after the Ganav stole it, the Bailam were miyayish. V'slakadatich Yeush Koina. Sheni amai eina mishalom elakeret. Why does the Sheni only pay keren once the Bailam were miyayish, the Ganav was koined? Now that a third party stole it from the Ganav, he should also pay kefel like any other student. So you have proof from here that Yeush is not koined. So yes, there was Yeush in the first case, but the Ganav is not koined. So therefore, someone who stole it from the Ganav will not pay kefel. The mechira was good. Because the mechira, in the second case, the mechira was good because there was Yeush and Shinu Rishus. He's chayiv dalvei for selling it because when he sold it, it wasn't his yet. The kinyan was chal, and therefore the person who steals it from the purchaser will pay kefil to the purchaser. Correct. Correct. So So we're still going back to what we were learning 2 days ago, back to the shaila of whether or not Yeush is Koina. And we had a machlokes Rav and Rabbi Yosef. Rav said Yeush is Koina. Yosef said it's not Koina. We have a kasha now again on Rav. You have a right from here that Yeush is not Koina. Omar Rav, Zok Rav, if it is Bura Hamataratzti, you're asking a kasha from this brisa as if this brisa is perfect. I'm going to show you this brisa is so riddled with trouble, therefore you won't be able to bring any rights from a brisa that's riddled with trouble because there's clearly some editing required. Let's look at the Sefer. We never looked at the Sefer yet. We looked at the Reisha, we looked at the Mitziyasa. Now let's look at the Sefer. El de Katani Sefer. Gona v'tovach, u'bo'acher v'gonvoi, Risha Mishal Nashlumi Ava b'chamisha, v'sheni ein Mishal ela keret. And this Duvi asked right away, U'me'ikol aman damar shinu ma'isa lakoni. There's no greater shinu ma'isa than changing an animal from a live, vibrant animal to a piece of meat. So that's a major shinu. So of course, that after that shchita, the ganav should surely have been koina the meat. So why is it that when someone steals the meat from the ganav, that person does not have to pay dal v'hei? He of course should have to pay dal v'hei. My mic is not working. Okay. My mic was not plugged in. I'm not sure if
we can hear you just fine.
Oh, you're able to hear me fine? Okay. I'm not sure which mic I'm using now. But as long as you can hear me, we're good. So Zok Gemara, so why is it that the Ganav who came and stole the meat from the first Ganav, why would he not pay kefil? By now, being that it was shechted, the meat belongs to the first Ganav. So therefore, the second Ganav should have to pay kefil to the first Ganav. So because of that, we have to redo this entire Mishnah, this entire brisa. You have to say this whole brisa is speaking before Yeush. And we have to do a switcheroo. We have to change the psak halacha from the seifa to the mitziyasa. The ebuch seifa l'mitziyasa, mitziyasa l'seifa. The emahachi. So before we look at the switcheroo, let's just remind ourselves what the brisa said. The brisa said by the case of mechira, there the kinyan is chal, and someone who stole from the buyer, he's going to pay kefil to the buyer. But in the case of shchita, there's no kinyan, and therefore the person who stole the meat from the ganav will not pay kefil. Now the Gemara is saying we're doing exactly the opposite. You know why? Because it's speaking before Yeush, and Shina Rishos B'lo Yeush Leikani. In fact, the Mechir was not Kal. We're editing the brisa, and we're saying the psak is not that the person who stole it from the purchaser pays kefil. The person who steals it from the purchaser does not pay kefil. Why? Because it doesn't belong to the purchaser. Because there was never a Yeush, and Shina Rishos doesn't work by itself. But Ganav V'Tavach Hu Bo'acher B'Gonvoi, there are Rishon Misham Tashlume Bava Chamisha, V'Asheni Misham Tashlume Kefil, Dekanya B'Shinu Ma'isa. Because when you shecht an animal, that's a Shinu Ma'isa, and with that the Ganav was koine the animal. So therefore, once you have that, if it's speaking before Yeush, you no longer have any raya as to whether or not Yeush is koine or not, because all brisa is speaking without Yeush. Let's not change it around. Let's leave it the way it is. What was the whole problem we had with the Sefer? Once the Ganav shechted the animal, there's a Shinu Ma'isa. Everybody knows the Shinu Ma'isa is koine. So why is it that the fellow who stole the meat from the Ganav, why doesn't he have to pay kefil? Dr. Papa, very simple. Sefer Beishama he da'ama shinu b'mkayma imed. Beishama held shinu is not koine. Maybe the Sefer the Brisa is following according to the Shita of Beishama. Frank the Gemara, if that's the case, ihacha kasha reisha umitziyasa l'rav. That means you're sticking with our original pshat. In our original pshat, we were forced to say that it was speaking la'achar Yeush, and it proved that Yeush is not koine. So the way you're learning, it's going to be shver on Rav. Rabbi Zvid, so Rabbi Zvid said, well, let's see if we could touch it differently without modifying the brisa. Right? We're looking to avoid modifying the brisa. So Rabbi Zvid, kula lefnei Yeush. Really, the brisa is speaking before Yeush. And now let's take a peek into Rashi. Still don't change around, don't edit the brisa, and keep the psak halacha in the brisa as we originally read it. And v'seifet kidu kimna kivei shamai. Explain the Sefer why the Tvicha didn't create a kinyan, because it's following like a papa, the Shita Beishamai, that Shinu is not koine. U'mitziyasa the katani sheni mishalem kefel, and the mitziyasa where the ganav sold it, and then someone came along and stole it from the purchaser, where the Brisa says you pay kefel. The question is, why would you pay kefel? There was only a shina rishus, there was no yiyush. Zokt Rashi kagoyin shnishayishu abaylim la'achar mechira. So you have yiyush and shina rishus, just not in that order. You have shina rishus followed by a yiyush. V'lo nisyayishu bi'ad ganav. The abaylim were not miyayish while it was by the ganav. After he sold it, then the baylim were miyayish, and that's the chiddush of Reb Zvid, that yiyush and shina rishus is not only kind of in that order, it's kind of in the opposite order as well. If there was shina rishus and then yiyush, that would create a kinyan as well. That's why the first person pays dalad v'hei. The lo have a yish gabei dilakanya. He never was koined because there was no yish, so he pays dalad v'hei. When he sells it, the seller was koined because at that point there was a yish. The seller was koined, and now anybody who steals it from the seller, from the buyer, anyone who steals from the buyer who's now koined will have to pay the buyer kefil. For Reisha Nami, in the Reisha as well, it's speaking before Yeush. While it was in the Ganav, the Shush was before Yeush, and therefore, if the second Ganav steals it from the first Ganav, he does not pay Kefel. Levichach Sheni Pater Mikefel. So let's see the Gemara inside. Amar did Olim Kuluf Na Yeush. V'Hachabamayas Shenisiyashu Abaylim Biloy Keach. They were only miyayish once the item was sold to the Lakeach. In this case, it's a shor or a seh. V'Loy Nisyayishu Beganav. They were not miyayish while it was still in the control of the Ganav. The Havila Yeush. There was Yeush by the Moicher. V'loy tema mishum davinon Yeush v'shina rishos. And don't say, so we have a riot to Rav. I'm sorry, we have a riot against Rav that Yeush alone wasn't Koina, because you need the shina rishos to affect the kinyan. Zok Reb Zeir, no, it's not a riot to Reb Yosef against Rav. Elafilu b'Yish l'chudei nami kan. Really, Yeush alone would have made the kinyan. Gabaganev, by the Ganev himself. In other words, if the Bailim were Mayayish, when the item was still in the hands of the Ganev, the Yeush alone would have been Koina. Don't bring a right from this price otherwise. So the question is, why did we have a case where there was Yeush and Shina Rishos? Elo Deloy Mishkachas the Mishalmi Tarvayu, Ganev Rishon, Big Ganev Sheni Elo B'Hachi. In order to find cases where Sai the Ganev Rishon was not Koined, and therefore he has to pay Dalet V'Heit to the Bailim, and Sai the Lekeach is Koined, so that when someone steals it from the Lekeach, that Lekeach will have to pay, that stealer from the Lekeach will have to pay Kefel. The only way to set such a thing up, whether you hold Yushish Koina or not, is only if the Yush occurred after the property was not in the Rishus of the Ganev, rather it was already in the Rishus of the buyer. So that's why the Bryce chapped on such a weird case, because the Bryce was trying to create a scenario where Sai the first Ganev would pay the Knossos of the Alvei, and Sai the second Ganev would pay the Kefil. Because all this work, we don't have a right as to whether or not Yusuf is paying or not. That's the short version.
That's the thing that people.
Well, you have to refund the money if they're seizing. Yeah, if they're going to seize the animal, then there's a scam. You sold them the Brooklyn Bridge. Yeah. You have to understand, he's obviously selling this in the back of a truck, right? I mean, it's stolen goods. Zaktamar Itmar. Hamoicher lefnei Yeush. What happens if you sell, the Ganev sells before Yeush? Rav Nachman Omar Chayiv. Rav Nachman says the person will be Chayiv. And clearly, if the Ganev sold it before Yeush, there is no kinyan. At that moment, there is no kinyan. But it was an attempted kinyan. So Rav Nachman says Chayiv. So right away, we have to link this to what Rava said. You're Chayiv Dalvei for attempting to make a kinyan, even though your attempt was not successful. Rav Sheshes Amar Potter. Rav Sheshes says it's Potter because I guess Rav Sheshes says in order for you to be mechuyev, he'll argue on Rava. In order for you to be mechuyev in Dalvei, what you did has to have an impact. Rav Nachman Amar Chayiv u'mecharoy Amar Rachmana v'azaven. And he did try to sell it. Loishna lefnei Yeush, loishna lachi Yeush. It does not matter. It does not matter. Rav Sheshes Amar Potter chiyuve la'achar Yeshu da'hani ma'isa. The only time the Torah is mechayiv you for mechira is if your mechira is effective. Alefnei Yeush, the loy hanamaisav, loy mechayiv, you wouldn't be chayiv. Dumya the tzvicha beinan, the hanamaisav. When you shecht an animal, it's very dead. So therefore, when you sell, it has to be very sold. Let's see Rashi. Chiyuva la'achayish hu the hanamaisav, mishakanu lakeach. When the lakeach bought it, it has to be that the sale was valid. So Zok Rashi, let's do an inventory because we had a lot of different svaras flying around. Let's see if we can summarize them. There's actually a three-way machlokes in how mechira works. Rav Sover Yishkan. Rav old Yushish Koina. The only way for someone to ever have a chiyah for mechira or for tvicha is only if it was sold before Yeush. So according to Rav, you're only mechira l'fnei Yeush. So Rav clearly would have to hold like Rav Nachman that it's the attempted mechira that triggers the chiyah of dalad v'hei. Rav Nachman and Rav Sheshes Sabri, Yish grade the loikan. Rav Nachman and Rav Sheshes both argue with Rav and hold Yeush is not kain. So Rav old Jesus Koina has no choice. He has to learn like Rava that the only way to be mechira the dalad v'hei is because of your attempted mechira. But Rav Nachman and Rav Sheshes, who hold Yeush grade the loikani, they could have learned that the sale was after the Yeush. Everybody agrees post Yeush, if the Ganav sells it, for sure he'll be chayiv dalad v'hei. Rav Nachman loy boyu ahanumaisa. Rav Nachman knows will even be a chayiv dalad v'hei if your mechira didn't work, even if you sold it before Yeush. Hilchach afilu lefnei Yeush greda nami chayiv. Rav Sheshes boy mechira gemur. If there was Yeush. Right now, if there was Yeush, by a case of Koina v'Naganav, according to Rav, he would not pay kefil, and according to Rav Nachman, Rav Sheshes, he would pay kefil, because according to Rav holds Yeush Koina, if there was Yeush, the second guy would pay kefil. But according to Rav Nachman and Rav Sheshes, where Yeush is not Koina, by Koina v'Naganav, even after Yeush, you would not pay kefil. That's correct. Gavaltik. So now we have our shitas. So Zok to Gemara. I'm Rav Sheshes. I'm Rav Sheshes. What do you mean? We would never got to this daf. We would still be. I'm Rav Sheshes. Mina aminala. How do I know? How do I know this halacha? The Tanya we learned. So how do I know that it has to be effective? I'm Rabbi Kiva. This is the same Rabbi Kiva that we quoted at the bottom of the Samach Zayin Amud Aleph. We started with this Rabbi Kiva. I'm Rabbi Kiva. The reason why is mipnei shenishtarish bechet. So he's learning Rabbi Kiva like we originally learned it. Not nishtana bechet. You tried to do it twice, but no nishtarish bechet. You seal the deal. As Rashi says, also shrosh. Your chet took root and it's becoming permanent, which would be mashma the hanumaisa. So based on what Rabbi Kiva said, nishtarish bechet, Rabbi Sheshes wants to build that Rabbi Kiva says that it has to work. Amos, when does the mechira actually be effective? There's no nishtarish, the mechira wasn't valid. Ela la'achayishu. Rava, I don't know if Rava can argue on Rabbi Kiva. Maybe Rava was explaining what Rabbi Kiva meant with nishtarish bechet, and it's mipnei sheshana bechet. In your soul, you're reinforcing chet because you try to do it twice. Gavaltik. Tashma. V'tavchai u'mechari. Matvicha shein chazeres, af mechir shein chazeres. The same, we're recycling the same concept all over again. Amos. Ileim lefnei Yeush, if it's before Yeush, amay ein chazeres. Why do you say it's ein chazeres? The mechir is not valid. El lachi Yeush. U'shmami no chiyuv ilachi Yushu. Yavarad chiyuv is only after Yeush, like Rav Sheshes. Tigmar of Nachman. Prat l'shehikna loy l'shloishim yoim. The same teretz we said earlier to for Rav. No, all that means to be reminded is if the sale's not valid, but even the not valid sale that you made had to have been an attempt at a permanent sale. Rabbi Lazar also agrees to Rabbi Sheshes. Now we're introducing a third party to the discussion. We had Rabbi Sheshes, we had Nachman, we had Rav. Now we're introducing Rabbi Lazar, who holds chiyuv alachayishu only if the mechira is effective. Domer Rabbi Lazar said, Teda, you should know, shestam geneva Yeush pilot. Normally, when someone has something stolen from him, the bailam are going to be miyayish. as Rashi says, miyad misyayishin. The moment someone discovers that something of his was stolen, he will be miyayish right away. I'm sorry? Oh, the machron ganev la'achar, and if the ganev sold it to somebody else, miyad kana, the ikatar to Yeush v'shinu shos. How do I know that? Shari. Amr Torah ganev u'machar mishalom ba'alvei. V'hadil maloya yayish. How could the Torah say just a blanket statement? If you steal and you sell, you chayv d'alvei. How do you know you chayv d'alvei if there was no Yeush? The mechir would have been chal. So it must be that the Torah assumes that the Bailim would have been miyayish right away. I don't usually do this, but I have to say over a joke, I'm Eli Stefansky, because he's talking about being miyayish right away. So he said over a story. You heard the story? He said over a story where I was once with my wife in a restaurant in Los Angeles, like 10 years ago, and they leave the restaurant, and the moment they step out the front door of the restaurant, his wife had realized that she left her purse in the restaurant. So they quickly turn right around to go back into the restaurant, and it's not there. It's not on the chair. You take off, you sit down, you put the stuff usually in the chair near you. It's not there. So he quickly goes to the owner, and he tells the owner, my purse was stolen over here. Well, he said, well, what should I do for you? So I tell the owner, what do you mean what you should do for me? Look at the cameras, and you'll see who took the purse. No, we can't do it. It doesn't work. I don't know. The owner's giving them a round. The reason why the owner was giving him a runaround is because most of his workers are illegal, and he can't afford to lose good staff. They catch a staff member in theft, unlike in Biden's days, they send them right back. So the owner was giving him a runaround. She says, listen, I'm warning you, I'm going to do something that you really don't want me to do if you don't look at the cameras with me. No, I can't. So he gets up. He says, I would do something like this. My wife was mortified, but I would do this. I got up on the chair in the restaurant. I screamed, ladies and gentlemen, there's a thief over here stealing purses. Be careful. And the owner was so freaked out. He said, okay. I'll open up the video. They opened up the video, and it was the waitress who served his table, took his purse and was thrown into the dumpster. So now the owner is under fire. So the owner actually climbed into his dumpster, was looking through, and he finds the purse. They open up the purse, and everything is in the purse as it was lost, except for the money that was in the purse, except for the cash. So clearly, his waitress has taken it. So what did they do? The owner and the waitress and Ellie had to powwow. But first, the owner had a little powwow with the waitress. Then they came to him and said, we'll make a proposal. She didn't steal it. She's denying she's stealing it. But she doesn't want trouble. She's willing to pay you whatever cash was in there. So he says, I know exactly how much cash was in my wife's purse because I had given her $100 that day. And I know she spent $8 of that $100. So I know there was $92 in the purse. So I tell her there was $150 in the purse. And she says, no, there wasn't. There was only $92. So he says, that's how you get someone to be moida, but that's a guy who was loyal to Yeshua by. So he says, the next time you're in a restaurant in LA and someone steals your purse, this is how you get it back. Okay, but first send your wife to the car. Okay, Zok the Gemara weiter. Zok the Gemara weiter. El Lam Mishonarin is Tam Gnev Yeush Pailam. Zok the Gemara, no. V'dilma Afal Gab Deloy Aish. Maybe the Torah is being mechayiv dal v'hei, even though there was no Yeush, as Rashi says, v'dilma chayiv rachmana v'Afal Gab Deloy Aish. So the Gemara, of course, Rabbi Elazar part, we're calling according to Rabbi Elazar because that's what we're talking about now. The Yalaf v'Hacha Yeush was Tam Gneva. Rabbi Elazar wanted to prove from this pasuk that Stam Gneva there must be Yeush Bailim, because otherwise, how could there be Chiv Dal Vei? The territory is like Rava. Maybe you're a Chiv Dal Vei, even if it wasn't a good Mechira. Amri Loy Sol Kedai. I don't agree with that because Dom Yudin Tzvicha, the same svar we've been recycling until now. Ma Tzvicha da Hanumaisav, Af Mechira da Hanumaisav. V'ilif Ne Yeush, if there was not yet a Yeush, Ma Ahanu, his sale would clearly not have been valid. Why would you be Chayv Dal Vei? Correct the Gemara. Maybe the pasuk is talking about the pasuk that's b'chayv dal vei, and you want to say that it has to be after Yeush. Maybe dilma dishmeina da ayish. Maybe the case that the pasuk is talking about that we heard the bailam be miyayish, as Rashi says. You can't prove that every gneva automatically by default we assume that the bailam are miyayish right away. Maybe not. Maybe the case of the pasuk is speaking where the bailam actually expressed clearly are miyayish. That's not mistaber to say that that's what the pasuk is talking about. Tvicha means a person takes animal, he takes it home, and he shechs it. There's no delay, there's no additional step. So too, the mechira, he took it home, and he sold it. You don't see any notation that there was some other step involved, like actively seeing a expressed yush by the owner. I'm going to prove to you that, in fact, it could be there was no yush. Why? Because the Torah also talks about hagoynev ishu mechorai, and they catch him ischayiv misa. Over there, ein yush bailam. The person, the victim of the kidnapping is never miyayish. No one ever gives up on his own life, as Rashi says. All of those hostages, who are in the hands of Hamas, they're not giving up on their lives. Everyone fights for their life till the very end. Nevertheless, when you try to steal a kidnapped person, that mechir is not kal. There's no yush. So the shinur just doesn't work. Yet the Torah says you're mechayiv. The Torah is mechayiv someone nisa for doing that. Clearly, that's only an attempt. So therefore, you, Rabbi Lazar, who want to say that it must be speaking where the mechira is effective, look at some other chiyuvim of mechira where you say it doesn't have to be effective. Mechlal desav Rabbi Yochanan lefnei yush chayiv. So you see clearly from Rabbi Yochanan's comment is that he must hold that the mechira does not have to be effective in order for you to be mechuyev dalvei. So he clearly holds that before Yeush, if you sell it, there'll be a chiv dalvei. But what is Rabbi Yochanan's opinion? Is Yeush koina or not? So la'achi Yeush mai. What would Rabbi Yochanan hold? La'achi Yeush. Would he hold like Rav that Yeush is koina and then I'm put from dalvei because shaloyu tevech shaloyu moicher? Or does he hold like Rabbi Nachman and Rabbi Sheshes that the Yeush alone is not koina, and even after Yeush, if you sell it, where the sale will be effective, you'll be chayiv dalvei. Rabbi Yochanan mai. So la'achi Yeush mai. So Rabbi Yochanan Omar Chayiv for Shlokish Omar Potter. Oh, so I guess it's not a shaila on what Rabbi Yochanan holds. It's a shaila on what Rabbi Lezer holds. So Zok to Gemara, Rabbi Yochanan would hold Chayiv, meaning Yeush is not koina. For Shlokish Omar Potter, which is like Rav, who holds Yeush is koina. Rabbi Yochanan Omar Chayiv because Chiyuve bein lefnei Yeush bein la'achar Yeush. The Chiyuv of Dal V'Hei will be Sai before Yeush and Sai after Yeush. Which Shlokish Omer Potter Chayuv lefnei Yeshu aval acher Yeush he holds like Rav Koina b'shaloy tevech b'shaloy u'meicher. Sorry.
Why would Rabbi Yochanan hold after Yeush?
No, I don't know if we're bringing a raya from Yochanan. I think I made a mistake. I don't think we were looking to know what Rabbi Yochanan holds. I believe I misspoke. Lach Yeush misav lo Yeush grade the kani karav b'shaloy tevech oidima Yeush loy kani b'cholshkin v'lach Yeush mechayiv dahana ma'asav. The truth is, I'm not sure if it is Rabbi Yochanan that we're probing. So maybe we were probing. Maybe we were probing what Rabbi Yochanan holds, and the question is, what would he hold La'achi Yeush? If you hold Yeush, not koina. If you hold Yeush, you'd have to dispute Rav, hold the Rabbi Yochanan, hold Yeush, not koina. Right? So then you'll be chayiv even La'achi Yeush because it's still not yours. Okay, Zok to Gemara weiter. We can see Tosha for a second. Tosha says, Rabbi Yochanan saber chiyuv bein lefnei bein le'achish tema l'char kaim alon karaba. Here's where I was looking for this Tosha yesterday. Remember, I was looking for Tosha yesterday that says that there's this contradiction as to who we pass on. So tema the l'char kaim alon karaba the yish kedi kani. The pashas is we pass on like Rabba who holds yish by itself as koina, like we learned earlier. Rabba said yish is koina, but we also have a kaim alon Rabbi Yochanan the Rabbi Shlokish. We also have another rule that when Rabbi Yochanan argues with Rish Lakish, we usually pass like Rabbi Yochanan, and Rabbi Yochanan holds Yeush is not koina. The chiyuve afla acher Yeush, but my chayiv acher Yeush, even the Yeush kani shaloyu teveich v'shaloyu moicher. So this is the test I was looking for yesterday. We seem to have a stira in how we're going to pass it because we like passing like Rabba, that Yeush is koina, but we pass like Rabbi Yochanan, and he seems to hold Yeush is not koina. The Yeshleimer the efshid like kaimelon loy karabba, but loy Rabbi Yochanan. The kama amiroi nechluk b'shvei dvarim b'shnei elu hadvarim. When do we pass like Rabbi Yochanan Rish Lakish? When it's only a machlokes Rabbi Yochanan Rish Lakish. When do we pass like Rabba? When he says in the normal case. But when there's such a big tumult and so many people are weighing in on it, there the rules might be different, and therefore you can't ask a kasha who he passed. So I guess the Gemara was probably what Rabbi Yochanan held, and the Gemara quoted the Rabbi Yochanan, where Rabbi Yochanan Befeir says that you're chayiv l'achar Yeush, which tells us that the Rabbi Yochanan holds that Yeush is not koina. Rabbi Yochanan is going to bring a raya that Yeush is not koina. Again, these are all recycled rayas. A person stole something and he was makdish it, and then it was shechted. So the question is it his already because he was makdish it or not? The halach is mishalam tashlume kefel. The ene mishalam tashlume above chamisha. You don't pay dalbei. Amos. At what point was he makdish? Was the guy of makdish the animal? If he was makdish it before Yeush, mikadosh, it wouldn't be hektish. You can't be makdish something because it says in the pasuk is kiyakdish es beisai kodesh. And we darshan ma beisai shaloi. Just like a house, you could be makdish because it belongs to you. Of course, shaloi. So to anything that you want to be makdish has to be yours, and this animal before Yeush is not yours, so you cannot be makdish. The person who was makdish this animal, the ganav who was makdish this animal, could only have possibly been makdish after Yeush. The time of the hikdish, who the einim mishalam tashlume bava chamisha. The Brisa says, why don't you pay the albei? Because he was makdish it. Mashma, before he was makdish it, even though the bailim were already miyayish, he would be chayiv. So the time of the hikdish, the mishalam tashlume bava chamisha, the chikatavach, the hikdish katavach. Because when he shechted it, he didn't shech the bailim's animal, he shechted the animal of hektish. Avaloi hektish, but if he was not makdish it, even though the bailim were miyayish already, tavach if he shechted it, mishalim tashlume abava chamisha. V'sol kadadich Yeush Koina. If Yod Yeush is Koina, amay mishalim after Yeush, why would he pay dal v'hei shalayhu teveach shalayhu moicher? Amarlei, the Gemara says you don't have a raya. You don't have a raya from this brisa that Yeush is not Koina. Hakabamayas kegoin shekti shayu bailim biyad ganav. When it says ganav v'hikdish, it doesn't mean ganav and the ganav was makdish it. It means ganav and the bailim were makdish it. Break the Gemara, how does that change anything? Umi kadosh v'yomer Rabbi Yochanan goes over loy nisayishu abaylim shneyan ein on yichon lakdish. Neither can the ganav nor the bailim can't be makdish either. Zel lefi shein shaloi. The ganav can't be makdish because it's not his. V'zel lefi shein b'shusay. And because he stole it. He stole. Whenever you steal and you're caught with it, you pay kefil. Well, now it's hektish. When I stole it, it wasn't. Right? So so the bailim can't be makdish. So what is the case where the bailim could have been makdish? Army Dr. Gemara, we have someone who argues on this halacha of Rabbi Yochanan, and who holds that bailim could be makdish something even though they don't have control over it, even though it's eine b'shusai. Who damer gets tnuin? We'll say this brisa is going according to the brisa of tnuin that says that an owner could be makdish something even though it's not in his control anymore. It's not tnuin. No, these two were very fine people. They had fields with pears in them that were neteravai. Neteravai are pears that you're not allowed to eat. You have to be paid to them, right? They're treated like a ma'aser sheni. You have to eat them to be paid to them. And the problem is, if someone steals fruit, if someone comes into my orchard and steals fruit, I'll be moichel them. I don't want to be ganavim, but they're going to be over on the issue of neteravai. I want to protect them from doing that. I'm worried about the public. So you know what the tznun used to do? Manichin es hamois, they would put a chunk of money down on a desk somewhere. They would say, kol anilkat mizeh, anybody who picks any of these pears, automatically at that moment, yeh muchulal al mois elam. So at least the ganev is going to get pears that's free and clear. There's a famous story with Reb Chaim, I believe it was with Reb Chaim Soloveitchik. He was on a train, it was very cold, and he had gloves. And what happened was, as his train is pulling out of the station, he realizes that one of his gloves he had dropped on the platform. So you know what he did instinctively? He quickly took the glove out of his pocket and threw it out on the platform. Because the guy is going to find a pair of gloves, at least let him have a pair. I'm not going to have a pair. At least let him have a pair. That's tznuin. They want to help even the people who are going to take from them. I think that story was with Chaim Soloveitchik. I think that's the story with it happened with somebody. Some like it's tznuin. The Amrina that come on, the Kerem Ravai, had tznuin manichin. In other words, b'nei adam chasidim, erlich people, sheroitzin lasalik yidei kolodim in a havera. They want to prevent anybody from doing an avera. Kishiyesh lahen Kerem Ravai. If they have camera by, and they're afraid people are going to take without pinion. Whatever anybody took today from my pairs, should be mechula. Alma, you see from here, at this point, the pairs are not in the rishus of the Bailam anymore. Still mifrik, they're going to be able to be paid to them. The tough and the pidyon will actually work. I don't understand. In the case of Ikdishu Bailam, Zok Rashi, if the Bailam were makdish to carbon, why would the person even have to pay kefil? It was ganav behikdish. The ganav stole it. The Bailam were makdish it, and then the ganav, let's say, takes it. The ganav's going to, what's he going to do with this carbon? I don't know. But whenever they catch him with the carbon, they didn't really catch him with the stolen item in his possession. You know why? Because Ikdishu Bailam, kefil amay mishalim, harichaz rekeren liyodam dak shul kol heicha deisa. The Balta Kedusha is chal according to its nuin. And this animal now became a carbon. What's the difference if the ganav is physically holding on to it? It's not in his possession anymore. The kefel loy mechayiv elik eshenimtas biyad ganav. Shabo Adam. Adam have to catch the ganav red-handed with the ganeva in his possession. So if you're only chayiv kevel if you're red-handed, well then if they only caught him after the Baalim had a hektish already, it's not mine anymore. It's hektishes. So why do I have to pay kevel? And if the Gemara Amad Bedin, before the Baalim were makdishit, so Rashi Shabo Adam Koidim Shik the Shu Baalim, and they went to the entire, so he got caught red-handed before it became hektish. That's right. So now the Gemara Shaila is what is considered a psak that it's chayiv kevel. Hey Chadam, Idam read say tainloi. If Bezin said the words say tainloi, go give him. My ear you hikdish. What's the difference if he was makdish or not? Afilo hikdish nami lo l'chayiv. Because if he said say tainloi means you paid it back already. So even if he paid it back already, he shouldn't be mechuyev kevel because it's already back in the ganas. It's already back in the Baalim's rishus. If they're in Bezin, right? If they're in Bezin, and Bezin told the Ganav, say Tainloi, give him back his object. Bezin said, give him back his object. If Bezin said, give him back his object, so then at this point, it's already as if it was returned by the Bailam. So you're saying, but they caught him red-handed before that case. I'm not sure. So let's see how the Gemara feels. Zok the Gemara, my area hikdish that my area hikdish. It says gonna be hikdish v'achach tavuch mochar. No, it says gonna be hikdish v'achach tavuch mochar. He's not going to be chai, right? Dalvei, right? So here too, if they said say tainloi, now it's considered like he gave it back already. So if he makes a tivicho mechir now, he'll be potter. Right. You shouldn't be chayv dalvei. Kevel avad you chayv, but you shouldn't be chayv dalvei because it's like the ganav has already returned it. And therefore, even if it did not become hektish, it's still shouldn't be a chiv dalvei. So Dama Rabbit say Tainloi, Tabach Machar Potter.
You could have a chiv cake. Then if you Tabach Machar, chiv dalvei.
That's if you still have it. That's if you still have it. Once they pass it, it's as if you returned it already. Dama Rabba says, say Tainloi. Once Bezin says say Tainloi, it's considered returned, and therefore Tabach Machar Potter. My timer, even the Paskula Milse. They ended this episode. This Geneva story is over. We Paskin's going back. The Tavachu Machar Havalagas. Now, if you go and shecht someone else's animal that's already returned by him, that you're doing it in front of his face, the Gazan ain't Mishal, the Shlom above the Kamisha. Not a Gazan. So if you're grabbing an animal after everybody sees and everybody knows and you shecht it, you're not Chayiv Dalvei. Zok to Gemara. So the teretz is Chayiv Atalitanloi, but if it's Chayiv Atalitanloi, which is not such a severe psak, they didn't actually tell him to give it, they just told him theoretically you're Chayiv, then Tavach Machar Misham Tashlum above the Kamisha. My time, since they didn't formally finish this whole episode, Akadi Ganavu. So okay, no problem. If Bezin only says Chayiv Atalitanloi and you were Tavach Machar, you'll be Chayiv Dalvei. But if at that point, after Chayiv Atalitanloi, the Bailam were makdish it, then you don't pay Dalvei. Gewaltig. Okay, we'll stop here.